Yeah, hi everybody. It's really interesting and different to be sitting on this side of this right now.
Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm excited.
Good.
A little nervous.
We
But
Just a little. Bear in mind, if you go over, you get the hook.
Okay, all right. So
Don never remembers, so you're cool.
So what I'd like to do before I get into the topic that I'm going to talk about today is just to take a moment and bring up some gratitude. So we can start just by each of us, if you'd like, bringing to mind something in your life that you're grateful for. And then specifically for me, I'm really grateful that this center is here, and for Ken keeping it going, and for everyone that keeps it going. It's been a huge deal for me in my life that you guys exist and that we exist as a Sangha. So thank you. And also I'd like to thank our Dharma ancestors, the women and men who have dedicated their lives to the Bodhisattva path of coming to know and passing down the Dharma for the sake of all beings. And, can we honor their lives and their efforts through our own lives and our own efforts? And always giving gratitude to this nourishing wholeness of the earth that we rely on for every breath that we take, for every drop of water that we drink, the food that we eat. Our entire lives we depend on this earth, and so remembering that always and giving gratitude. And relatedly, to the miracle of human life, that not only are we alive, we are conscious of it, and we have access to the experiences of wonder and curiosity. So how amazing is that? So what I'm going to kind of get into today is basically just my own story, how I got to be here. I'd also like to talk a little bit about Sesshin and Sesshin at Windhorse, for anyone that's interested in that. And just why practice is relevant, why do this, why spend our time and our energy doing this. So for me, I kind of had a moment of conversion when I was about 24 years old in 2009. And that was the first time that I experienced myself as something other than just a single consciousness inside an isolated body. And so this hasn't been like backed up, like no one's ever said, oh, that was a Kensho or an awakening experience or something like that. I don't know what it was, but I came to know that I am something bigger than just a single thing, that, we're all this wholeness and that we're inextricable from one another. And that changed a lot for me. It was like this huge relief and gratitude that just pervaded my life, that I don't have to worry. I don't have to try and arrange the pieces of my life to make myself feel as happy as possible, as much as possible. And that instead I can know myself as this whole and live out of that. And that was, that took a lot of pressure out of my experience and added a kind of different sort of pressure. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a bit, but I'd like to talk about kind of my earlier life and what led up to that shift. So I grew up in really high material comfort. I was protected from a lot of types of suffering through my privilege of just being comfortable and having a supportive family. But at the same time, I did experience a series of personal traumas that I wasn't able to integrate into my life and into my being. And as a result, I experienced a really high level of anxiety throughout my childhood. I think the first time that I went to the doctor for heart palpitations, I was like 9 years old or something. And so this kind of like peaked when I was maybe 17 years old, and I started to become very depressed and started to have this really strong feeling that I don't belong in this world, that I'm different, that I don't fit. There's something wrong with me. I shouldn't be here. And that lasted for a long time, probably about 7 years, all through into my mid-20s. I just used a lot of alcohol and drugs and other kinds of destructive behaviors to try and deal with the intensity of that separation, of feeling like I'm not supposed to exist, I'm not supposed to be here. So that was a really dark and difficult time for a while. But I kind of bumbled my way through college and ended up in graduate school to be an elementary school teacher. And it was when I was in my early 20s, when I was in graduate school, that I started to become obsessed with this question of how to live the right way. It was like some of that depression started to lift, and it was like, okay, if I'm not just going to get dragged around by my life, what's the alternative? Like, what do I do? How do I live if I'm conscious of what I'm doing? And it was like this, it was like, at that time, it was kind of heavy. It was like, I was like stuck with it. It was like I couldn't move past that. Like I didn't know how to take the next right step, because it was like, but what is the next right step? And so I kind of had this commitment to living more consciously, but I didn't know what that was going to look like. It's like, what matters, you know? And those words, I know a lot of you guys probably know Basui's words that really kind of like hit home for me. Like I didn't know those words at that time, but now looking back, he says, "Great is the matter of birth and death. Life slips quickly by. Time waits for no one. Wake up, wake up. Don't waste a moment." It's like, okay, but like, how do you do that, right? And it was like a lot of pressure around that. And I kind of felt like there was like this lock in my solar plexus. And if I could just find the right key to put in there and turn it, then it would all, okay, I'd know how to live. I'd know what to do. And so, there was almost this feeling of like desperation about it. And I tried to answer that, obviously, with my intellect. I was just reading and reading. I was in graduate school, but on top of that, I started taking philosophy classes at the community college. Like, if I could just know, like, the history of human thought, then I could, like, piece this all together. I remember making this, like, Amazon wish list and, like, working my way through it. It was called The Quest. And it was like, I'll just start with like ancient Sumerian literature, and then I'll go into like whatever, and none of it was really helping. So at that time, somewhere around there, I started doing yoga as like stress reduction. And a teacher there suggested that I check out the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and that was the first time that I had read anything that was like, there's other things you can do with your mind than think. And there's other ways of resolving these questions than figuring out the answers. So that kind of like, I started to sit at that point, and I didn't know what I was doing. I'd like sit and stare at a candle flame, or like just om a lot, or like just like whatever. I don't know. I didn't know what to do, but I had a sense that there was like something there to do. And I got a little bit into like Shambhala, and I remember reading something of Pema Chodron's, and it was so clear to me that she knew the answer to my question, and I was so angry with her because she wouldn't say it clearly, what the answer was. And like, it was like, come on, like I know you know. And it was actually reading some of the Tao Te Ching that like clarified that misunderstanding. And so I'm going to share just a little bit of verse 15. And I remember reading this for the first time. This is, I can't remember the translation now. Yeah, I didn't write it in here. But I remember reading this the first time, and it really had a big impact. It says, "Look, and it can't be seen. Listen, and it can't be heard. Reach, and it can't be grasped." And then a little later, it says, "Approach it, and there is no beginning. Follow it, and there is no end. You can't know it, but you can be it at ease in your own life. Just realize where you come from. This is the essence of wisdom." And so that's when things started to shift, and this questioning started to take on a different tone. Like I was still using my intellect a lot, but there was this sense that there's something else there, that I was just kind of listening to, like, to myself on repeat in my head, and trying to resolve questions that were happening at a different level. So I started sitting. I got involved with the Shambhala lineage and did their level 1 training. I would like ride my bike from Sarasota to Venice to like go to their sittings up there or down there. But I was still reading and reading and reading. And eventually I got hooked up with Michael Gregory's group. I don't know if anyone here might have worked with him at some point. And I showed up there one night for the first time, and he was in like the 3rd week of a 8-week series on Mahamudra, and I remember, like, because I was there for the first time, he was kind of asking me my background and telling me this might be kind of intense if you're brand new, you know. And I'm, okay, just tell me what to read. Just tell me what to read, and I'll read it, and then I'll get it. And he told me, and this, like, sticks with me, that, you know, if you just read and you try and understand and you don't balance that out with actual experience, you're going to be like a one-winged bird, and you're not going to get anywhere at all. And so I stuck with that group for a little while. But the teachings of emptiness that I came across in that context really confused me. And I ended up kind of feeling nihilistic and existentially screwed up. Like, nothing matters. I don't know what exists. What, you know, is, like, I remember him, he's got this, like, bottle of water, and he's like, what is this? What do you think this is? You think this is a bottle of water? This isn't a bottle of water. This is just this. That water's in your mind. It's just like really aggressive. And like, oh, I don't know what you mean. But I did stick with that, and I did sit, and I started sitting a lot more, and that was really inspirational. It wasn't quite like I didn't quite find my home there, but there was a lot of value in that. I remember, like, at some point, someone said in one of those meetings that, you know, you can answer the deepest questions that a human being can have through this practice. And I just blurted out, like, well, why would anyone do anything else? Like, why would anyone do anything else if that's what you... And I've come to understand now that that's, like, not everyone has that calling, and that's why. But yeah, definitely started to connect with that. So we're kind of back to where I started this rambling journey, that all this pressure started coming into my practice, and it was like, I felt like I couldn't take any steps because I didn't, everything was like, but that's not the absolute deepest right thing to do or something. And so at some point this culminated and kind of this created this like crack in the sense, like the shell of my sense of self. It was like I can see in my journal, like I don't remember like the moment that it happened. I can see in my journal at the time I started drawing these little like infinity signs that just said, you are that is you, or that is you, or that is you, or that is you. And it was just like, yeah, all right. Like it's like it wasn't so much that it was like, oh, now I know how to live, but it was like I knew two things beyond all doubt. I know that I'm everything, and in particular that this earth is my body. Like this, there's no, like, I mean, yeah, I have this sense of self, and that's real, and that exists, but like far deeper and simpler than that. It's like this whole incredible universe is no different or separate from my own self. And also that the meaning of my life is to be of service to that whole. And that just took this huge weight off of me. That I don't have to worry about little me so much. I don't have to arrange everything for myself. And so these things, they're not separate. They kind of like flow into each other in this like, you know, it's like if your sense of self changes, if your sense of self expands, then it's not separate from like self-preservation and partiality to do what you can to try and decrease the suffering of the whole, right? So that was all like maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I guess. And so over the next 5 or so years, I finished school. I became an elementary school teacher. I got married. I read the 3 Pillars of Zen and found this place. And I remember I wrote an email to the main email address here, and I said, like, oh, my name is Jamie, and I want to go to Sesshin. And Dorothy wrote back, like, why don't you come for a Sunday sometime? Okay. So I did come for a Sunday sometime, and I started coming every Sunday, and eventually the opportunity came to do Sesshin. And it turned out that was actually a really, like otherwise in my life, it was a really intense time. So when I signed up for Sesshin, which I think was somewhere around, the Sesshin was in March of 2014. That's a meditation intensive retreat for anyone that doesn't know that. And we did it here. It was a 3-day. It was the first time that I met Lawson. And when I signed up for that retreat, I was pregnant. And about 2 weeks before the retreat, I found out that I was miscarrying and that the baby had died, almost definitely. And so I had to wait a week to see if anything changed and then have another ultrasound. So I ended up having that ultrasound on a Thursday, and I found out that she had died. Friday I had a surgery to complete the miscarriage process, and the next Thursday was sitting in sesshin. So it was an intense time.
Wow.
Yeah. And actually within that same week, at my job as a school teacher, I had to decide whether or not I was coming back the next year. So also within that time frame, I quit my job. So it was kind of it was an intense time. And so I did the retreat, and when it was absolutely life-changing. I didn't work through any of the grief that I was experiencing. That was just kind of aside. But eventually, I did work through that. And we'll talk a little bit more about sesshin in a minute. But yeah, so everything kind of got thrown up into the air at that point. And it was a really intense month. I also had a family member, an aunt, die of brain cancer. So I left sesshin and went and saw her for the last time. And so I kind of went into that march one way, and I came out a little bit different. And these questions that I had about, how to live and what it means to be alive, they were intellectual before, and they became embodied. They just grew with intensity, and it wasn't just in my head anymore. It was I have to resolve, how do you live in this world? What does it mean to be a human being here on this planet, in this place and time? And yeah, so there was just this revival of that kind of questioning in me, where I kind of got myself on a pretty conventional track there for a while. And so about 7 months after that, I made it up to Windhorse for the first time. I went to a 7-day retreat there, and I've been to every retreat that we've done since then up at Windhorse. I really kind of found my place there. And so if you haven't been to sesshin, it's a really, it's like no other thing. It's like no other time. It's like everything that isn't essential, you just put to the side for a while. And, I'm sure you guys know in that chant, the 10-verse Kannon Sutra, it's through the day and through the night. And it's just the practice. While you're sleeping, while you're eating, while you're sitting, there's just this luxury to not focus on anything else. You don't have to worry about anything else. And whether your practice is the breath, or you have an inquiry practice, or you're working on something else, it's every single sesshin I do, I end up in Dokusan saying, can you believe this exists? Can you believe that over the last 2,000 years, 2,500 years, people have refined this process of being able to work on and access things that just are not possible to work on and access in regular life. It's when you put everything else aside, I think of it you got these things that are semi-conscious. You can kind of see them. You kind of look at them like this. And then when you drop everything else, you can actually all right, what's there? What is, whether it's an emotional habit pattern, or something even more or less structural than that, it's we get to see ourselves. And to me, that's important, because when our vision is clear, we can bullshit ourselves a lot less. We just kind of have to live more truly. So I made this bold decision to leave off my relatively conventional life in order to work on this primarily. So I got divorced. I sold my house and pretty much everything else that I own. And I moved up to the Zen Center. And I want to be clear that my sense is not that I was running away from my life, or that I made that decision lightly. I really... it's that same question, moment by moment, what's the next right step? What's the most true thing I can do next? And so, why do this? Why practice? Why do any of us practice? What's the point of spending our time doing this? And I think that's different for different people. And so there are, practices, if our aspiration is to feel more calm and more grounded, maybe that's what is important to us in our lives. And for me, what makes it seem absolutely of the most importance is really the pain of the earth. Like, I just can't, I rarely forget, even for a moment, that we're destroying our ability to live on this planet. And it's really sad and demoralizing, and I go through that grief kind of again and again, that I just can't believe what we're doing. And the problems that our global society faces in Zen, you know, we would call the three poisons, right? The greed, hatred, and ignorance. And it fuels this system where our culture thinks that nature is something other than us, other than humanity, and that it's there to be commoditized and dominated, and that we can continue to live an obviously unsustainable lifestyle forever without consequences. It's absolutely insane. I mean, we've got police in North Dakota who are using violence against people who only want to have clean water to drink, and the police are protecting the corporate interests rather than the human beings and their ability to live where they live. You know, if we burn all the fossil fuels that we have in reserves right now, the temperature of the earth would rise to the point that there would be a climate collapse. But we keep exploring, we keep drilling deeper, we keep looking. So we buy and we throw away, and we never really stop to ask about the people and the places that are being sacrificed so that we don't have to remember and come in contact with the fact that we're killing our home. It's, I mean, this earth is astonishingly beautiful. It is an incredible place to live, y'all. And we live our lives as if they're singular and they're linear. And, you know, we can come back to knowing what the trees know, what the cicadas know, what the raccoons know, what the rivers know. And that's that this vast wholeness of life is not linear. It's this dynamic becoming. It's a ceaseless dancing, almost always equilibrium that this awareness flashes through for a moment. And so what do we do with that? You know, I mean, that's incredible. And if we keep living like we're in a straight line and we're alone and we got to live this life to get ours and then get out, it's impossible. So I wrote this back in September, just share a short poem. This body, infinitesimal, indispensable, unremarkable, inextricable and momentary, does not need earth. It is earth. Machine minds say we need money to live, but we don't. We need earth to flow, to keep earth clean and alive. We need earth to flow to keep us clean and alive. How redundant. Or in other words, my favorite Twitter personality is this guy, Lord Crunkington III. Didn't think I'd quote him in a Dharma talk ever, but he says, anything is possible in this universe, and all you want is ostentatious displays of wealth. So, to me, this lack of sanity and sustainability of industrialized capitalist civilization is the most important problem that we face, and we face it together with the whole of existence, whether we like it or not. Like, there's just no way to not be a part of that. And so that's why I have put practice at the forefront of my life. I believe that so long as the bulk of human beings on this planet experience themselves as lonely and disconnected, these problems are going to keep persisting. And so as spiritual practitioners committed to the path of the Bodhisattva, that means coming to awakening for the sake of all beings. This is the time to throw ourselves into practice and to spread this truth of wholeness. So I'm just going to finish here with the final lines, or almost final lines, of the New Year's prayer for all beings that we say as the year turns each year. And then if anyone has any questions or comments or discussion, I'm really interested in that. So it says, may we all forge upstream against the forces of delusion and attain true liberation. Let us vow that as long as earth and sky shall last, we will continue on this path, not for ourselves alone, but to dispel the darkness of this world.